Warning. The opinions shared on this show are those of free-thinking individuals who, without payment or coercion, chose to be here and share those opinions with the world. This podcast may contain language, opinions, and ideas some people may find offensive and or controversial. Listener discretion is advised.
To Red Herring Radio. My name is Wally Danger Walberg, and I am joined in studio by the Natrix, along with our host, B-Dizzle.
Thank you, Danger, for that wonderful lead-in. And thank you to everybody listening tonight, or today, or wherever you are. We have a wonderful show planned for you tonight. We're going to be talking about Bigfoot. Now, I know a lot of people out there are skeptical about Bigfoot or what it could mean, and we're going to touch on that a little bit tonight. We're also going to be talking about ancient civilizations. How advanced were they? What kind of technology did they have? And is it possible to have advanced technology and then somehow lose that technology? We're going to be talking about all that. We're going to touch a little bit on the phenomena of people hearing voices. Now, it's not like just hearing yourself talk to yourself in your mind. We all do that. This is more of people actually hearing an auditory voice, just like you're hearing my voice right now. But quickly, I just want to go around the room here and say hi to everybody and see how they're doing. Unfortunately, the ninja couldn't be with us tonight. He had some other obligations to take care of. And
pursuing a great mystery, I assume.
Well, I really hope so. I hope it's something that is worthy of missing the podcast. But we love him anyway, and he should be back next week. We're going to start with Danger. Danger, how you doing, bud?
You know, I'm doing really good. I'm excited to be here tonight to talk about these topics that we got lined up. It should be a great show. Thanks for having me.
Great, thanks, and we're excited to have you with us. Next, we're going to turn over to Natrix. Natrix, how you doing, bud?
Hello.
Thank you. All right, so I think to start things off here, we're going to talk about a couple current event topics. And one of the biggest topics right now in the news is the passing away of Joan Rivers. She died at the age of 81 on Thursday, September 4th at 1:17 p.m. and she died of heart failure. So that's kind of a big loss to entertainment world. She was
an icon for sure.
She was kind of a comedian, a stand-up comedian icon of sorts.
She had her controversies.
Absolutely. Her daughter is quoted as saying, "My mother's greatest joy in life was to make people laugh."
Melissa Rivers there.
Yeah, Melissa Rivers. I think that's a good thing to have. If that's your greatest joy in life, to make people laugh, that's a very good thing to live for.
That article is brought to you by CBS News.
All right, next up we have USA Today. Reports of missing Libyan planes raise 9/11 terror fears. Now, 9/11's coming up next week. And according to this article here, reports that 11 commercial jetliners are missing from the main airport in Libya's capital of Tripoli.
Tripoli?
Or Tripoli? Why can't you say Tripoli?
Pretty sure it's Tripoli.
Okay.
You say Tripoli.
All right. So, the Washington Free Beacon...
Sorry.
The Washington Free Beacon, a conservative news website, cited anonymous sources who said intelligence agencies have warned the jets could be used in attacks in North Africa and elsewhere on September 11th. And then on abcnews.com, we have ex-Virginia Governor Bob McDonald and his wife found guilty of corruption. Now, this drew my attention because it's an ex-governor. And we would hope those people would have a greater sense of morality. Obviously they don't. They're still people. It's like hoping that the police have a greater sense of morality and duty and wouldn't do those things and lower themselves to those type of things.
I would somewhat argue in favor of like a universal moral standard, that while I do understand that these authority figures would be held to a higher code of ethics, perhaps, like he's being tried in a court in a way that is supposed to be of equals that anybody would be tried on. A Richmond jury today convicted former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell on 11 of 14 corruption counts. His co-defendant wife, Maureen McDonnell, was found guilty on 9 corruption counts and obstruction of justice. The charges stemmed from granting favors to a wealthy businessman in exchange for more than $177,000 worth of lavish gifts, vacations, and loans. The pair was acquitted of bank fraud charges. This is not a quote from the article, but what sort of favors was she granting?
I'm not sure I really care to know, honestly. She's not...
Are you having sex?
All that was from ABC News, and we'll have a link for that in the description. Up next, we have Ukrainian ceasefire begins, but U.S. still skeptical, and this is coming from ABC News as well, and the Associated Press.
Ukraine, Russia, and the Kremlin-backed separatists signed a ceasefire deal Friday after 5 months of bloodshed, and Europe readied additional sanctions on Moscow. NATO leaders created a new force designed to prevent any aggression by Russia against alliance members. Gunfire and shelling appeared to fall silent across eastern Ukraine shortly after the appointed hour, to the relief of the war-weary residents. But the U.S. voiced skepticism that the rebels and Russia would stop violating Ukrainian sovereignty.
Do you realize that this is a big problem?
Yes, the Natrix.
Yes, indeed. But this is good. This is what we're looking for. It inspires some hope in me that people can rise above their tendencies for violence. I'll say this.
Absolutely.
Next up, we're at themirror.co.uk, and this is an article, SAS and U.S. Special Forces forming hunter-killer unit to smash Islamic State. Now this ties into what we were talking about last week about ISIS.
Elite British and U.S. Special Forces troops are forming a hunter-killer unit called Task Force Black. Its orders? Smash the Islamic State. The undercover warriors will aim to cut the head off the snake by hitting the command structure of the Islamist terrorist group responsible for a trail of atrocities across Iraq and Syria, reports the Sunday People.
And we'll have a link for this article in the description below. Next up, I wanted to touch back on the black-eyed children phenomenon. Now, we had a couple comments in our first episode, and they both inferred that the black-eyed children in some way could be related to the vampire myth. And I found that interesting. Now, it was suggested that maybe they were somehow psychic vampires. Psychic vampires being a type of being that doesn't necessarily have to drink blood to sustain itself. It sustains itself on the emotions and the mental capacities of others.
So the idea there being then that the black-eyed kids, also sometimes abbreviated as BEKs or perhaps Becks.
Tell me what you will.
So
Anyway.
indeed, call them what you will, but the idea or the correlation perhaps being between psychic vampires and the BEKs would be that the fear that's manifested in their presence is somehow, creating the fear, and the people that they're visiting is feeding them the energy that they need to sustain.
Exactly. And that's the idea behind it. And
Creepy, in a word.
Is that the truth or a lie?
That's what we're here to talk about, perhaps.
That's absolutely what we're here to do. We will have a link for a YouTube video titled, What's a Psychic Vampire?
Sookie Stackhouse?
Possibly. And this is stuff they don't want you to know on the How Stuff Works channel, and I recommend checking out more of their videos. They make really good videos. So moving on, we're going to head right into our first topic of the evening, and this is the phenomenon of people hearing voices. Now, it's not necessarily voices just in their heads or the voice you hear when you're thinking to yourself that is your inner monologue. This is quite often what they describe as an auditory voice that they hear outside of themselves. So it would be as if I wasn't here and all of a sudden from your left you heard me say your name. Hey, Danger. But I wasn't there, but you heard it.
In your voice?
Not necessarily. I'm just trying to give an example of the type of thing we're talking about.
Okay.
From just the research I've done, it's often voices they've never heard.
Just a strange foreign voice.
Yes. So this phenomenon is interesting to me because it's hard to say if this is just a mental disorder, so to speak, or if it is something paranormal that is happening. According to people who claim to hear voices, it is quite common to hear your name called when there is no one with you. And, most people just shrug it off. Who's to say that even the people it happens to, for all I know, it's happened to me in my life. And I just shrugged it off. And it hasn't happened again, so I don't have a really strong memory of it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But from the research I've done, they don't have a consensus of a type of person this happens to. There's no,
uniting factor or anything
exactly.
like that.
It doesn't just happen to Chinese middle-aged men. So, that was just an example. It doesn't happen to one demographic. It seems to be spread across all people, and it doesn't just happen to people who have schizophrenia or a psychosis of some kind. Now, there's lots of reasons that you might have this phenomena happen to you.
And
they
can be mundane explanations.
Well, lack of sleep. You begin to hallucinate if you are sleep deprived. Hunger is a big motivator in such things. If you're very hungry, you can begin to hallucinate. If you're sick, sickness can have a great impact on your psyche. It can cause you to see and hear things that aren't there. Drugs, obviously. Drugs have a psychological effect. So you might hear or see something if you're on drugs. We're not really talking about seeing things, but hallucinating is hallucinating. It has all sorts of effects. Psychological reasons that you might be experiencing things like this, such as abuse or bullying, or traumatic experiences, such as post-traumatic stress disorder. People who have gone through war or, traumatic events such as that. And even people who have had great spiritual experiences say they've experienced this phenomenon. So that's why I question whether or not is this a mental disorder? Is it even a mental issue? Or is this a paranormal thing that we're never going to really be able to explain? I mean, could this be some form of ESP? Could these voices that these people are hearing, could that be the thoughts of someone else somehow jumping out of their heads and being...
So just like a radio wave is expressed through space, the people's thoughts could be sent out in a similar way, and there's just something going on with the brain that's causing it to pick up the brain waves of other people.
Exactly. I mean, that wouldn't totally account for the fact that these voices often seem like they're talking directly to the person.
That's true. If it's like calling out to them, that seems different.
Now, could these voices be angels or demons?
Perhaps.
Or, passed on loved ones who are trying to somehow help us by talking to us?
Here's what I noticed as a common theme between those different reasons for causing or having these auditory hallucinations.
But we weren't implying that those are the only reasons.
They're not the only reasons.
Those are some reasons that we were giving to, in some way, give a scientific explanation for the hearing voices phenomena. Now, we're not claiming to know what the reason truly is, but those are some reasons that have been shown that you can get that effect.
And the common uniting factor in those reasons seem to be stress on the brain. I know that when I'm hungry, my brain is constantly telling me that I am experiencing that. When you have lack of sleep, your brain is under a great amount of stress, as well as the post-traumatic stress syndrome and all the other things that were listed. It seems like a brain that has been put under stress can lead to auditory hallucinations.
That seems like a very astute point you make there, Danger.
Thanks.
I try to believe that there's nothing with the right technology, with the right technological discoveries that the scientific method can't be used to explain. I don't refuse to accept that, because I do believe there are some paranormal things going on in this universe, and science just might not be able to explain it all. I accept that.
But isn't that like our current level of science can't explain it?
That's the point I was making. That's my hope, and that's what I really stand by. That as our science becomes better, or as our technology becomes better through our scientific discoveries, it allows us to make greater scientific discoveries, thereby getting better technology. But if this is something paranormal, then how does science prove that? Well, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it is an angel. When people hear these voices, if they're not on drugs, if they've talked to a doctor and haven't been diagnosed with a psychiatric mental disorder, if they're not sleep depraved, if they're not food depraved, if they don't have anything going on that list of things we talked about earlier, and they hear the voice, and it is an angel, let's just say that. What does that mean? What is that for science? How are we going to prove that? It can't be proved. It's just one of the, it dwells in that realm outside of science, and I think that is the realm where the consciousness we are came from. We can't even prove consciousness. Science has probed the brain, and they think, they make all sorts of assumptions that it's, created by the firing of neurons in a neural net. That's a good assumption, but you still can't find the consciousness inside the brain. So I think fundamentally, this is just something that, obviously we know it can be caused by certain things. Scientifically, that's what we talked about earlier, but there are some cases out there that you can't explain it, and it is just as real for those people as it is for the guy taking LSD who hears Beethoven talking to him. I don't know why I picked Beethoven just now to say it, but for some reason that guy popped into my head.
Yeah, and that brings up a point about, like, to what extent can you really trust your senses? Like, for instance, when you put a straw in a glass, when the straw was straight and you put it in the glass, your sense of touch taught you that, but when you look at it in the glass, it appears bent because of the water. So
right.
What are you to trust?
And we know scientifically why that happens.
And so that has been explained by our level of science, but if it were to be the case that this auditory perception is angels, then it would just mean that a new level of science would maybe have to explain it.
Now again, we're not making the statement that we think it's angels. That was just one of the things while doing some research for this topic that I came across, so I wanted to touch on it.
You have to consider all the possibilities.
Absolutely. And finally, if this really is a paranormal thing, or not even a paranormal, if this is a natural phenomenon that can happen to anyone, and maybe it stems from the fact that when you really get down to it, we are all one thing. We are all part of this universe. And at one point in time, according to our scientific theories, everything that is in this universe was in something smaller than an atom. We were condensed down. We were all together at one point in this little ball of energy. And then it exploded into the Big Bang. And then it all condensed and made matter and all that fun stuff.
That's all kind of moving around to this day.
Yeah, it is still moving. In fact, space is expanding, and it is expanding at an accelerated rate.
So you're telling me that the auditory hallucinations are the echoes of the Big Bang from a time when all minds and consciousness and matter was united?
I think fundamentally this is just going to have to remain kind of a mystery until science progresses to a point that we can somehow pin this down. I don't see how that's going to happen, but mysteries kind of make life interesting. And with that, we're going to have a break. So, Danger, what we got coming up in the next segment?
All right, thanks. Coming up next on Red Herring Radio, we'll have our entertainment news where we head over to IGN.com to talk about current and upcoming video games. After that, we'll be discussing the mysteries of ancient technology, thinking a little bit about what life may have been like, as well as how ancient technology can be lost. And in our final topic, we'll be discussing the big hairy monster itself, the Bigfoot. All that and more coming up next on Red Herring Radio.
Hi, my name is Noah Turquoise Jackson. Well, it's nice to meet you, Noah. My name is Cletus. I'm here to talk to you about water. Is your water rusty? Does it leave your teeth yellow, your coffee mug brown, and your shower unspeakable? My, it's like you live in my house. Well, I visited the municipality the other day, and they have a sewage treatment facility that sends clean water right to your house. Golly, that sounds expensive. You think it is, but I went through the trouble of bottling it up myself and bringing it to your front door. It's available in this 20-ounce container, a 1-gallon jug, or even this, that's a huge barrel. Golly, now that's convenient. Why don't you try it, Sis? That is crisp. I'm Noah Jackson, telling you to buy city water today. Golly, that's refreshing.
Warning. The opinions shared on this show are those of free-thinking individuals who, without payment or coercion, chose to be here and share those opinions with the world. This podcast may contain language, opinions, and ideas some people may find offensive and or controversial. Listener discretion is advised.
Broadcasting to you from the land of 10,000 lakes, welcome back to Red Herring Radio.
Oh, yeah!
Red Herring Radio is brought to you by City Water. City Water, now free of flesh-eating parasites.
Preceding statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. Please do not drink city water. And now here's our host, D-Dizzle.
Thank you very much, Danger. So to start things off here on the second segment of tonight's podcast, we're going to be looking at some entertainment news. Danger, what do you got for us?
Well, first of all, we're talking about some of the popular games that are currently out. The top of the list here on IGN.com is Diablo 3, The Ultimate Evil Edition. It has an IGN score of 9.2 out of 10, and obviously that's a good score. This game, I have never played, but I was a huge fan of Diablo 2. Hopefully this one's cool. I think one of the big things is that it's on the console now, and I've heard that it's a much better console game, Diablo 3 that is, than it was on the PC. They have ironed some things out and worked that out.
I would just like to interject for a moment and say that to say you were a fan of Diablo 2 is a slight understatement. Anyway, not to deviate. Continue, please.
Yeah, also on the list of current popular games is Madden NFL 2015, with the NFL season starting yesterday. It's no surprise to see this on the list. We also have a new Metro game, but upcoming, we see a new Grand Theft Auto release, 5? I thought this game was already out. What's the story here, Dizzle?
It was released already on Xbox. It was released on Xbox 360 and
now
PS3.
It's on the Xbone and the PS4.
Correct, and it's going to be released on PC, and I am very excited for this. I've been waiting to play this game.
Yeah, it looks like a good one. We got Halo 5 Guardians coming out soon, along with Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor. These all look pretty cool, along with the new Super Smash Brothers. And a new Batman game, Arkham Knight. The previous Batman games are pretty widely renowned. I know I played through the first one and it was really good, so hopefully this one's cool. And we also see Assassin's Creed Unity in November. Looking forward to that one, Dizzle?
Possibly. I don't know if that piques my interest so much, considering I am playing Assassin's Creed Black Flag at the moment, and that game has really captured me because of the pirate aspect of it. That game is amazing. You're not just the The Assassin's Creed part of it is fun, but the true enjoyment of that game for me is being a pirate captain.
Quick segue. Yeah, that sounds really cool.
Pirates are cool. Come on.
To segue into a game that I've been playing a lot lately on my mobile device is WWE Super Cards. It's kind of a fun little game where you collect cards and play out a little game against other online players where it's all about stats and numbers and leveling up the stats on your guys. There's 4 different categories that break down into. Each card has its own stat. It's power, toughness, speed, and charisma. And based on whoever has higher numbers wins the match. And there's other factors that make it interesting and entertaining.
So are you playing that on Android or?
I have it on the Android. Yep, you can just get it from the Play Store. It's free, and it's pretty fun. I recommend checking it out if you're a WWE fan at all, or just, like card games or anything like that.
All right, great. Thanks, Danger, for that. That's our entertainment news for this week. Next up, we are going to be discussing ancient civilizations and their ancient advanced technology that they are reported to have had. Some of them, at least, had. So, to get into this topic, I think we should start at a point where most people can find familiar ground.
Okay.
And that would be Atlantis. I'm pretty sure everyone has heard of Atlantis, whether it be in a animated movie or a book.
It's the source of a lot of myth and folklore and stories and things like that.
In ancient Greek, Atlantis means island of Atlas.
I see.
Yes. So, Atlantis is a fictional, quote-unquote, fictional island mentioned within an allegory on the hubris of nations in Plato's works Timaeus and Critias. Hope I pronounced that right. I don't know if I did, but everybody knows or has heard about Atlantis, and allegedly Atlantis had advanced technology, advanced beyond what we have even today. But that's just the example that most people know. I wanted to talk about some of the things that people might not know so much about. So the first thing I wanted to talk about would be the Antikythera mechanism. Why can't they give these things simple names? It's frustrating. The Antikythera mechanism. This remarkable mechanical device that is often described as the world's first analog computer was retrieved by sponge divers off the coast of Antikythera in or around 1900 AD. And this thing looks like a machined piece of technology. It looked like it had to have been built with something that, something akin to a lathe. Next up, we're looking at the Abydos carvings. These are hieroglyphs located approximately 450 kilometers south of Cairo in Egypt. And these are ancient hieroglyphs that appear to show a helicopter and planes, and it's very interesting. It's compelling to see these things carved into rock thousands of years old. I don't know. I look at this and I can't help but see a helicopter. I don't know what they would be inspired, like what in nature would inspire the Egyptians to carve this. I don't know.
Well, here's a theory or a thought, though, because, have you ever seen the picture of a vase that's actually 2 faces? The fact that and how you can look at it and see both things. Now that we have the present-day knowledge of a helicopter, sure, we look at it and see a helicopter, but if I kind of use my imagination a little bit here, it almost looks like the left side is like the feet of somebody, and it's like maybe somebody laying down or something like that, and that's their chest in the middle there. It's open to interpretation, I think, and maybe because we know of a helicopter, we choose to see it as such.
That's an interesting theory. Just turning my head and looking at the picture a different way, it actually makes sense. So I appreciate that. That's a good theory. Thank you very much. Let us know what you think of that theory. Leave us a comment on that. Up next, we got the Dendera lights. There are 3 stone reliefs or carvings that can be viewed in the Hathor Temple section of the Dendera Archaeological Complex, which is located on the banks of the Nile, approximately 300 miles south of Cairo, Egypt. Now, pretty much, this is just a drawing on stone of what appears to be a light bulb. Now, you can't say it for sure, but it has the shape of a light bulb. It looks like what is a filament on the inside. The filament is a snake, however, so it's hard to say whether or not this is a depiction of a light bulb. There does appear to be some kind of cord coming off the end of it, and I believe that is a picture of a pharaoh holding it. So it looks like maybe it would be some type of sacred object. Now, this could be just the depiction of something else the pharaoh would have had, but if they had some sort of light bulb like this, part of me wants to believe that it would be held in esteem, and only someone like the pharaoh would be the person that would have it. I don't know. What do you think, Danger?
Well, what I am thinking about is the snake as the filament, and just it's interesting to me that, like, when you think about how ancient civilizations might try to, like, explain this sort of phenomenon, we see a lot of, like, animal folklore and things like that in the mythology. So for the thing to be causing the light, the snake itself, if it were a light bulb, I could see how the ancient civilization would explain it as being like an animal that is doing that. Just because other stories and things like that tie the gods to explanations of natural phenomenon, like how Chariot carries the sun across the sky and things like that.
Interesting. Up next, we have the Baalbek megaliths. Located at Baalbek in Lebanon are the largest megalithic stones ever carved from living, quote-unquote, living rock of a quarry. I'm not sure what that term means. What is living rock? Do you know? Are you familiar with that term?
Not offhand, but if I had to speculate, maybe it's rock that is, like, continuing to be geologically grown, like there's forces acting upon it that are causing it to become larger or something like that. The amount of rock is an increasing amount because of geological forces.
Anyway, I think that is fair speculation. Danger. Thank you. They range in size and mass, but the most sizable is an estimated 1,300 tons and lies unused. Now, you can't even... I mean, you can understand what that weight is, but 1,300 tons, that is so incredibly heavy.
Can we get a comparison to, like, how many airplanes that would be? Like, how many Boeing 747s is that?
All right, to give you some scale there, 1,300 tons, that's 3 Boeing 747 jets. This one piece of rock weighs as much as 3 Boeing 747 jets. That's incredible. That's mind-boggling. Or mind-boggling, depending how you want to look at it. All right, moving on. Next, we got the Baghdad Battery. Now, this is kind of more of a well-known one. It's made appearances on the History Channel with your Ancient Aliens and things like that program. These are described as 13 to 14 centimeters in height. They contain a copper cylinder, and within this was suspended an iron rod. Shortly after the start of World War II, a German archaeologist by the name of Wilhelm Koenig?
Probably.
A German archaeologist by the name of Wilhelm Koenig came across the item in a basement of the National Museum of Iraq. So essentially, these things are thought to use a chemical reaction to create electricity, I believe. Moving on. The Koso artifact. During 1961, 3 rock collectors were hunting for geodes near the town of Olancha in the state of California when they discovered a potential specimen that would stimulate more than 5 decades of controversy. Now, this thing looks like they have a picture of what looks like a spark plug. Is that what that is? Next to this thing? And it looks like a rock cut in half, but inside of it looks like a, 1920s technology in the form of a spark plug encased in a 500,000-year-old stone geode. This is the Koso artifact. That's essentially what they're claiming, that inside of this geode, a 500,000-year-old geode, is a spark plug. So that's what this Koso artifact is. What do you think of that, Danger?
I don't know what to make of it. It looks very strange, and I mean, I'm inclined to believe that it wasn't, some sort of technology put it inside the rock, and who knows if it is 500,000-year-old technology or not.
Moving on. the last little bit of this ancient technology segment, we're going to be talking about the Vimanas, and this comes from ancient India. They are described as powerful, hugely powerful flying machines. The oldest mention of these mechanics is found in the Sanskrit text known as the Veda and date back to approximately 1500 BC. A modern translation reads, jumping into space speedily with a craft using fire and water. So, I mean, these are ancient texts talking about craft doing this type of thing. In certain texts, there are descriptions of battle planes that fire missiles and use sound to find their target, and beams of light that destroy anything they touch. So that to me sounds like sonar. That to me sounds like lasers. Is it possible? Now, this is part of what I wanted to, talk about, and I'm kind of going to segue from the Vimanas. And obviously, I encourage everybody to come to this website. We will have a link in the description below, and check this stuff out for yourself and let us know what you think about it. But I want to segue into that. If they had things like this back then, if it wasn't aliens that brought this technology and we're using it here, and this was technology that we developed ourselves here on Earth, how did we lose it? How was it? How can something like this be lost? How is that possible? Danger, what do you think?
Well, to think about how it could be lost, you wonder about like a global cataclysmic event that could cause,
which
like
there is
all of
much
civilization
which
to be wiped
over
out by.
history there are many stories of such an event. I mean, the Great Flood out of the Bible is obviously the first one that comes to mind.
Right. And so, when we ask ourselves, like, where has this technology gone, specifically with the Vimanas, the flying machines and stuff like that, I think we have to wonder if it ever really existed in the first place. We have to ask ourselves that and establish that.
That is a very sound theory, that maybe it was just the science fiction of the day.
Exactly. Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that. Like, if we're able to make up a story about things that are not possible of now, could it be read years from now that, people would speculate, they maybe had this technology because there's writings about it. Another point that I wanted to make was about how we talked about how the battle planes were using the sound, which is a similarity to sonar, and the analogy to lasers and stuff like that. But maybe these things are only discovered because we're looking at the past through the lens of the present, and that's how these pictures are created. It's by...
Well, that's touching back to the hieroglyphs that you mentioned earlier.
Exactly.
And I agree. That's a legitimate theory on the whole thing. So, an interesting theory that a friend of mine alluded to once when we were discussing this. What if these Vimanas, or some of this ancient advanced technology, is actually evidence of time travel, and these things came to the past from the future?
And they got stuck there?
Possibly. Maybe it's a one-way trip. I don't know. Do you know? Or what if this technology, rather than being from the future itself, what if this is more of just evidence that people themselves from the future somehow made it to the past, tried to then recreate technology they had in the future, and to a degree succeeded in that?
Sounds like a space age Gilligan's Island if I ever heard it. Just going back to the Antikythera mechanism. It's a pretty interesting thing if you take a look at it on the website, and you see that it has all these gears and cogs and all these things going on with it that make it very intricate and whatnot. And it says that it was discovered around 1900 AD, and it's possible that all these things were used to help kind of predict the movements of the sun, earth, and moon, or that's what they're speculating that ancient civilizations may have used it for. That's what's being suggested here, at least. The point that I wanted to make was that they say it represents a standard of production that would not be seen again until the rise of complex clocks and clockwork in the 18th century. Now, this is not too far off from when it was discovered. So, that one's kind of looking like a plant or a hoax to me. Just on that, just the possibility. Like, the technology of the time was roughly to be able to make something like this, and then voila, they found something like that.
Well, I respect that line of thinking. I do respect that line of thinking because it's logical to make that kind of assumption. If we take a look at the Wikipedia on this thing, apparently it is in fragments, and they discovered many fragments of this device. And in 1971, a physicist made X-ray and gamma-ray images of the e.2 fragments. An extensive 70-page paper was published on the findings in 1974. I would think that if they did those tests with X-ray and gamma-ray images, I don't know. I guess I'm not finding any. They just said they made pictures of it. So I guess that doesn't definitively say whether or not it was made. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not saying for sure that it is a hoax or anything on this one, but I just thought it was an interesting coincidence that the technology of the day lines up with the technology that this device seems to show.
So I think it's another one of those mysteries. I don't know if we'll ever really know. Maybe those technologies were never really lost. They're only secrets. And again, mystery makes life interesting. All right, so next we're going to be talking about Sasquatch and the possibility that there is a cryptozoological mystery abound here in North America and the world. Is there a 8-foot tall primate wandering the forests of the United States and Canada and Mexico and Russia and the world, really? Now, when you think about how much wilderness there is out there in this North American continent, I know these stories come from the whole world of this creature or these class of creatures. They talk about the Yeti in Asia and the mountains, the Himalayan mountains. There's the Yeti. When you take into consideration how much wilderness there is in Canada alone, is it not then feasible that there could be a potentially intelligent primate out there? It is intelligent enough that it knows it doesn't want to be bothered by us. When you think about how many square miles of wilderness there are out there, when you take into consideration certain sites will tell you 38% of North America is wilderness, but up to 90% of Canada is wilderness. That is just, Canada is the second biggest country on earth. It is incredible how much wilderness is up there. So to me, if there is an intelligent creature out there, I don't think it would have that hard of a time eluding anyone. Yes, we have hunters out there that go out there all the time and they see things, but most of them don't. To me, it's not so far-fetched to believe that if there's a creature that lives out there all the time, it has the edge when you go out there. So you take into account how much wilderness there is to a small population of animals. You add on top of that a smaller group of people that are out there in the wilderness, maybe not even necessarily looking for these things. If you want to think about the people that go out and search for these things, cryptozoologists, they're such a small segment of the population of the United States and Canada that is it so far-fetched to believe that with so much wilderness out there and so few people out in the wilderness, is it so far-fetched to believe that that something couldn't be living out there that we haven't discovered yet?
I don't think it's so far-fetched to believe that, and that's why the search continues, and it is the people who are out there that have these stories and the somewhat photographic evidence. A couple weeks ago, we watched an interesting video. I think it was the Crystal Mountain Bigfoot video.
The Marble Mountain Bigfoot.
The Marble Mountain Bigfoot, and that is pretty interesting. If you haven't seen that, I recommend YouTubing that video and checking it out. I would like to take a moment to quote the immortal words of Mitch Hedberg. I think Bigfoot is blurry, and to me, that's scarier. There is a large, out-of-focus monster roaming the countryside. But
rest in peace.
Indeed. And so, one thing that I wonder if might help solve this mystery, or maybe, put some more people out there to try to find it, are those motion detecting cameras. I've seen a lot of programs on TV where they set up motion detecting cameras, and overnight, all sorts of different animals and stuff will walk by them.
Some of the most compelling things about this topic that really get me are the stories you have from Native American tribes of these creatures. And there's reports of them often trading with the tribe. So, could it be that when Europeans started settling this continent, that these creatures, for one reason or another, wanted nothing to do with it and broke completely away from having any contact with human beings and are now out there, and to them we are a threat, so they stay away?
Yeah, Dizzle, that's a really interesting theory. it seems to me that you could explain that kind of as like this wild man or Sasquatch or whatever had a very living with nature sort of way of life, and that may have been akin to the Native American way of life, and that's why they were able to interact and communicate and trade and, you know, have these experiences with each other. And for Europeans to arrive and drive the Sasquatch to the north of Canada and the south and to these other remote areas, that makes sense. It's possible.
Well, if I had to give my final 2 cents on this topic for tonight, I would say my gut tells me that we would have found something more scientifically bound in this whole subject by now. Science would have found something that could be definitive.
You mean like remains or
that
something?
Being said, yeah, remains, droppings, whatever, what have you. That being said, so last week on Coast to Coast AM, he had a guest, and she was a DNA expert. Her name is Melba Ketchum, and she claims to have tested many samples of DNA that show there is a distinctly different living primate somewhere in the world. So something tells me there's a whole lot more to this topic than most people think there is. A lot of people just brush it off like it's not realistic or not possible. I totally think it's possible. There's so much land out there. It's an intelligent creature, if it is intelligent, and I would assume it is if it is as elusive as people think it is. So, that being said, I think we're coming to the end of the show tonight, and before we ended the show, I wanted to say a couple things about the upcoming anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks, if that's indeed what they were. Whether or not they were terror attacks, whether or not the official story is what the government says it was, that's not what I want to talk about tonight. It's not about what the tribute was about. I don't want to make it about conspiracies tonight, and that's not what it's going to be. That day affected all Americans in different ways. It affected the families of the victims much more than it affected me personally. I remember where I was exactly when it happened. I was actually visiting Canada. And I remember I had 3 very distinctive feelings when it was all happening. At first, I felt guilty that I wasn't in America. I felt like somehow I should have been home for this event that was happening. And then I remember feeling alone because I was in Canada. I wasn't with Americans, and they were giving me their sympathy because they could tell, obviously, this was a major event happening to my country, and they were sympathetic, and I appreciated that. And I remember the last thing I felt absolutely, and this was just an inner feeling that I had with myself. I didn't share it with anybody at the time, and I've never shared it with anybody up until now. But I felt so embarrassed in myself that I was sitting there feeling bad for myself that I wasn't at home, and I was feeling lonely for myself and how much I was thinking about myself in those moments, and that was incredibly selfish of me. I mean, I was younger, hadn't had the time to mature and grow up and learn, but even in the moment, I realized that it wasn't a time to be thinking about myself. So that's really what the tribute was. We want to remember the people who did die that day, and we want to remember the people that had to live with that pain of losing those loved ones. So fundamentally, that's what it's really all about. Danger, did you have anything you wanted to say about it?
I wanted to say thanks for sharing your experiences with us. It is interesting that you were in Canada when this all happened and what that was like for you to go through.
Do you remember where you were? And
yeah, I was in my sophomore year of high school, I believe, and it was in between classes where the kind of attacks were unfolding, or the different events of the day. And so the one specific memory that sticks out in my mind was a friend of mine, we'll call him Big Al. He came up to me in between classes and he was like, "Oh, hey man, did you hear that a plane flew into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon is on fire?" And so his statement obviously was somewhat incorrect and like not completely full, because it turned out that there was yet another plane that hadn't even hit yet, and that it wasn't just that the Pentagon was randomly on fire, it was that it had been attacked effect as well. And so what I mean to say that his statement kind of encapsulates the whole day for me is that it was a incomplete and chaotic confusion that was taking place of not really understanding. But then I would agree that there was kind of like a unity that followed, where a lot of people realized that this was about more than themselves, and that it was a huge thing. A huge event had taken place. It definitely changed everybody's lives, and the ripple effect of it is being felt to this day.
Thanks, Danger. Thanks for sharing that with us. Next week, we will be touching on some of the theories surrounding 9/11, but that's next week's show. So I want to thank everybody for listening tonight, and I wanted to especially thank the people who listened to our first show again. And I wanted to personally thank Bleach Lover 221. He was the first person to leave a comment on our video. He gave us some good suggestions and some constructive criticism, and I appreciate that. I would also like to thank the user Mike Blake. He left some interesting things there for us to consider. I would also like to thank the user Travis Deedy. He left us a nice comment. So for Red Herring Radio, Wally, Danger, Walberg, and Natrix, this is your host, B-Dizzle. We'll see you next week.